What if, Tensura, Melting the Eternal Frost Part 12 author, JackDaWeb on Wattpad. This story depicts an alternate timeline wherein Velzard attends Walpurgis after sensing Veldora's presence. She subsequently meets our protagonist and becomes interested in him after his display at the meeting. After thinking for a bit, she decides to move to Tempest and becomes a close ally of Rimuru. Rimuru and Velzard will sometimes be out of character, OOC, as it is unavoidable for this premise. Rimuru, our protagonist, will be more rational and have an actual spine. Velzard, she will not be as cold and ruthless as her canon counterpart. Since Velzard is missing significant characterization in the early parts of the series, the author decided to write his own interpretation of her personality based on the original light novel. I recommend at least having seen the second season of the anime, since the story picks up from that point. This fanfiction will follow the main story beats from the original light novel, though some arcs will be glossed over if there are very few changes to the canon events. Chapter 29, Quelling the Chaos. Rimuru's POV. It really didn't take much to create Lord of Greed, Mammon. Once I gathered enough information on how greed worked, it was only a matter of time. I used it as a foundation to forge a new ultimate skill. It was efficient, seamless, and unremarkable regarding the energy required. I already knew I wouldn't need it. It was just a novelty, something I did just to demonstrate the sheer gap in strength between me and my opponent. This skill was too shallow, too tied to the whims of desires that were neither powerful nor meaningful enough for my goals. And while its potential was certainly dangerous for someone like Maribel, it held no value for me. I'd release it back into the cycle of reincarnation. However, just to be safe, it was always good to keep a backup. Seal had already read my mind. Backup of the ultimate skill, Lord of Greed, Mammon, has been made and stored inside skill storage. Would you like to proceed with its release? Yes, proceed. As soon as I gave the confirmation, I felt the skill leave my soul. It was a fleeting sensation, like a gentle breeze passing through me. There was no strain, no sense of loss. Just an empty space where the unnecessary power had resided. Because the skill wasn't particularly strong, it left behind almost no residue. I stood there, watching Maribel and her bodyguards with mild disinterest. The air between us felt thick with their rising terror, though I remained composed. The overconfidence she had just moments ago had evaporated, replaced by something much more satisfying. It was fear. The proud, imperious girl from earlier was now visibly trembling. Her lips quivered as she struggled to mask the panic that spread across her face. I could sense the tension in her bodyguards, too. They had been confident initially, but now, they were more than aware of the gap in our abilities. It wouldn't take long before this entire charade came crashing down. Still, I didn't have time to indulge in this cat-and-mouse game. There was a much larger threat waiting above. Milam was likely already confronting the Chaos Dragon, and while I trusted her strength, it would be foolish to let her handle it alone. "GG, get him!" Maribel screamed, her voice cracking under the weight of fear. Her bodyguards hesitated. They exchanged glances, unsure of how to proceed. They weren't stupid, and they could sense how futile this was. But Maribel, in her desperation, wouldn't allow it. Her aura flared, intensifying in a wild surge of magicules. It engulfed the bodyguards, surrounding them like a hungry flame. Their expressions twisted into something almost primal, their eyes glossing over as greed took hold of their minds, just as it had with Gaia. Now stripped of their will, they had no choice. Like puppets on strings, their bodies jerked forward, propelled by the force of Maribel's desperation. They rushed at me, their movements erratic and rapid. Even in their enhanced state, their speed was laughable from my perspective. Clearly, they didn't want to do this, but greed didn't care about their desires. It seems she's forcing them to act through her skill again, just as expected. Their physical abilities have increased, but their movements remain unrefined. Yeah, I noticed. The 8 men charged at me, their weapons drawn. They were fast by human standards, at least. But from where I stood, they might as well have been moving in slow motion. Their attacks were wild, uncoordinated, and sloppy. They were no longer fighting with their own skill. They were merely puppets, swinging their weapons under the influence of Maribel's power. Oh well, at least they didn't do the stupid cliché move of attacking an opponent one at a time when you've got an entire group. I suppose I can give them that much credit. Unfortunately for them, their fate was already sealed the moment Maribel used them as pawns. Their lifespans had been expended in exchange for this sorry excuse of a power boost, all for a fleeting chance at harming me. It wasn't even their own desire driving them. Rather, it was simply Maribel's overwhelming greed, suffocating their will and pushing them toward inevitable death. It was almost pitiful. Looking past their desperate charge, I spotted her. Maribel was already retreating, fading into the shadows of the ruins, using her men as little more than cannon fodder. How predictable. She couldn't even stay to witness the outcome of her own game. I stood still, hands casually tucked in my pockets as the 8 men lunged toward me. The clashing sound of metal echoed through the chasm as their weapons collided with my barrier, but they couldn't even scratch it. The shockwave of their combined strikes rippled outward, sending a gust of wind throughout the chamber, which surprisingly didn't toss them away like it did with Gaia. It made me wonder if Maribel had funneled more energy into them or if Gaia was truly that much of a weakling. Either way, it didn't matter. I don't have time for this, I muttered under my breath as the group, unrelenting, prepared for another assault. There was no hesitation in their eyes now, only the mindless determination forced upon them by Maribel's curse. The least I can grant you all is a quick and painless death, I said, raising my hand slowly as if the action carried no weight. With a simple thought, I called forth the vast abyss within me. Devour everything, Azathoth, I ordered. My voice was calm, as though I was giving a casual order, but the result was immediate. The invisible force of Azathoth rippled through the air, obeying my command. The 8 men, still mid-attack, were caught by its overwhelming pull. Instantly, their bodies elongated, distorted into strings of existence that were pulled toward me. They didn't scream, and they didn't resist. They were simply consumed, spaghettified in a flash as if the world itself had erased them from existence. It was over before they could even comprehend what had happened. There was no fanfare, no spectacle. And now, the 3rd layer of the Undercity was eerily quiet. I found myself standing alone once again, the remnants of battle fading as quickly as they began. Maribel had disappeared, slipping away like a coward. I could pursue her if I wanted, but it hardly seemed worth the effort. She wasn't important enough, and I had made my point. Besides that, the tremors from the Chaos Dragon continued to shake the ground beneath my feet, and Xian and the others were still handling the golems. With a quiet sigh, I turned away from the ruins. It was time to deal with the larger problems at hand. I quickly left the 3rd layer of the Undercity and made my way to the 2nd. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate. The 3rd layer had been eerily quiet after my encounter with Maribel, but the 2nd was alive with the sounds of battle. Gobta had successfully positioned himself to protect the remainder of the expedition team while Xian and Sue were handling the numerous golems that kept attacking. Once I got close enough, I called out to him. Gobta, you did well protecting these people. I praised him, and he quickly turned to face me, eyes wide with relief. Oh, Rimuru-sama, no worries here, Gobta assured. He stood tall, his expression full of pride despite the gravity of the situation. Those 2 are the ones who need help, he said, pointing towards Xian and Sue, who were fully engaged in combat. I glanced at the group of expedition members behind him, doing a quick scan to ensure they were unharmed. None appeared injured, though their pale faces and trembling hands showed just how rattled they were from the chaos surrounding them. Still, they had held up well considering the circumstances. Are you guys all right? I asked, my tone gentle enough to calm their nerves. One of the members, seemingly the most collected among them, stepped forward, bowing slightly. Thank you for saving us earlier, Rimuru-sama. He thanked me, and the others echoed his gratitude. I nodded, appreciating their resilience. Don't mention it, I told them before turning my attention back to Gobta. Guide them to a safer location on the higher levels. If you encounter any trouble, immediately let me know. I ordered. Got it. Gobta responded without hesitation, and with a final nod, I watched as he led the expedition crew away from the battlefield. The fear in their eyes was still apparent, but I was confident they would reach safety. Now that the civilians were out of the way, I could focus on the real problem. I warped over to Xian and Sue, who were locked in battle, each taking on 3 golems without breaking a sweat. Their movements were fluid and precise, every strike calculated. Hey, guys, need any help? I asked, not because they looked like they needed it, but because I wanted to gauge just how far they had come. Xian's face lit up the moment she heard my voice. Rimuru-sama, I'm glad you're safe. Her voice was full of energy even though she was in the middle of slicing through a golem's arm. "Don't worry about us. We can easily handle these golems," she declared, flashing a confident grin. I crossed my arms and tilted my head slightly as I took in the situation. Xian and Sue had definitely improved. The golems they were up against were no joke, each roughly as strong as Clayman in terms of raw power. Though they lacked intelligence, their sheer numbers made them formidable. "Ha ha ha, you guys have really come a long way," I chuckled, watching as Xian disarmed another golem with ease. "I don't doubt your strength, but their numbers are too high. At this rate, you guys will be here for hours." I informed them, but they carried on fighting. "It is not a problem, Rimuru-sama," Sue responded calmly, gracefully slicing a golem cleanly in half, his tone as composed as always. Sigh. These guys. With a smile on my face, I walked forward, positioning myself between the two of them. Before me stood the entire army of hundreds of golems, their featureless faces turned toward me, waiting for their chance to engage. They were menacing, sure, but no match for what I had in mind. It was time to wrap this up. "Didn't I tell you guys you could rely on me during times like these?" I asked, a playful tone slipping into my voice as I recalled these words I'd said to them during my days before becoming a demon lord. The stakes weren't as high back then, but the sentiment had always been the same. Always loyal, Xian wasn't about to back down so easily. "But Rimuru-sama," she began, her voice full of protest and determination. I knew she hated stepping aside, especially when she could prove her strength, but I raised a hand, stopping her before she could continue. "Again, I don't doubt your strength," I reassured her, my tone firm but gentle. "But we have other matters to attend to. For now, leave this to me," I added as my gaze softened. She looked like she wanted to argue but eventually sighed and admitted defeat. Xian and Sue obediently backed off, positioning themselves behind me. A strange sense of nostalgia washed over me as I stood there, facing the army of golems alone. The golems turned to face me, their faceless forms resuming battle, but my mind wandered briefly to my early days in this world. Things had been simpler back then. Now, I was responsible for so much more. Still, I didn't regret how far I'd come. If anything, it motivated me to keep moving forward. With my two companions out of harm's way, I could finally unleash the deadly combination I had been itching to try. Stretching my arm forward, I began channeling my magicules into my hand. The sheer power of the energy crackled in the air, and the temperature in the surrounding area dropped rapidly as I summoned a fierce wave of frost magic. In an instant, a flash freeze swept across the battlefield. The ground beneath the golems iced over, the cold creeping up their legs and encasing them in a layer of frost. The entire landscape was transformed into an icy tundra. The golems, once so menacing, were now frozen solid, their once unyielding forms locked in place, unable to move. I grinned, satisfied with the first part of my plan. Now for the finishing touch. Without hesitation, I altered the nature of the attack, channeling a massive amount of magicules into a blade-shaped surge of storm magic. I cast a storm blast, condensing the magical energy into a precise, deadly form. The blade of lightning crackled with intense power, and I sent it slicing forward through the air. The wave of energy hit the frozen golems with terrifying force. Their icy forms shattered instantly, pieces flying in all directions like shards of glass caught in a storm. But it didn't stop there. The blade of the storm blast continued forward, cutting through the entire army with effortless precision. When it reached the farthest wall, it detonated in a spectacular burst of energy, shaking the whole chasm with an explosion. The once formidable army of golems was reduced to nothing but debris, leaving the battlefield eerily silent once again. I turned to face Xian and Sue. Xian's eyes sparkled with awe, her face lighting up with admiration, while Sue stood calm and composed as if he had just witnessed something entirely routine. "You two, I want you to accompany Gobta and the others. Keep them safe, and be on the lookout for Yuki. It's no coincidence that things went south after he broke off from the main group." I ordered them, my voice now serious and firm. "Understood, Rimuru-sama," they responded in unison, their voices filled with resolve. I gave them a nod of acknowledgement before quickly warping to the surface. The moment I arrived, I was met with utter disarray. Above, the sky loomed the Chaos Dragon, a menacing presence that Milam was keeping occupied. Below, dark elves scrambled to evacuate the castle amidst the chaos. With a resigned sigh, I flew up next to Milam, who immediately noticed my presence. She was holding up well, as expected. But something didn't sit right with me. While the Chaos Dragon was certainly powerful, it was nowhere near Milam's level. Yet, it was still alive, leading me to believe that Milam didn't want to kill it. "Rimuru, I'm glad you're here. I may need your help," she said, her tone slightly concerned. "That's surprising coming from you. Can't you destroy this thing easily?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Well, I could, but you see, this dragon is my friend. Someone broke its seal. I don't know if I could handle putting it down," she replied, her voice filled with sadness. Throughout our conversation, we'd been flying around the Chaos Dragon, dodging its attacks while I kept the environmental damage to a minimum. "There might be a way to save it," I told her, and immediately, her eyes widened. "Really?" she asked, hope lighting up her face. While it was a bit of a long shot, destroying everything except the dragon's core was possible. By doing this, the core could be purified and embedded into a new host. However, that's easier said than done. Both Milam and I possessed more than enough power to obliterate the dragon, but to do so while keeping its core intact was a different discussion. After a bit of thinking, I came up with a solution. "Milam, I want you to incapacitate it briefly," I told her. "Incapacitate?" she asked, tilting her head slightly in confusion. "Just make sure it can't move for a moment. A second is all I need," I explained, and determination filled her eyes. "All right," she replied, her voice more confident now. Milam flew at the Chaos Dragon with frightening speed, her fist extending outward. Her strike connected with the dragon's barrier, producing a powerful shockwave as it shattered. The punch landed squarely against its massive body, sending the dragon crashing toward the ground like a meteor. Milam, however, didn't hesitate. She immediately began charging up one of her most destructive attacks, her aura flaring wildly as dozens of glowing objects appeared above her. "I'm sorry, but I promise we'll save you," she declared as the glowing spheres grew larger. "Drago Meteor," she bellowed, her voice echoing across the landscape. A barrage of brilliant blue meteors, each one as radiant as a star, fell to the earth. The energy trails lit up the sky, and the sheer force behind each projectile was enough to reduce towns to dust. Yet, despite their overwhelming power, Milam's control was nothing short of masterful. The projectiles honed in on their target with pinpoint precision. Each one curved and swirled through the air as if guided by Milam's will, aimed directly at the Chaos Dragon while avoiding the surrounding environment. The ground trembled as the first wave of Drago Meteor struck the dragon, followed by a second and third. Each impact unleashed a controlled explosion that sent shockwaves rippling outward. But despite the carnage, not a single stray blast veered off course. The dragon let out a deafening roar of pain and frustration as its form was bombarded from all angles. From my vantage point, it looked like a storm of celestial fire was consuming the Chaos Dragon. A blinding flash erupted as the final spheres of energy collided, obscuring the battlefield in a dense cloud of smoke and debris. The force of the attack was undeniable, but the Chaos Dragon, though badly wounded, still survived. I flew down to inspect the aftermath, my eyes scanning through the smoke. The ground around the dragon was scorched and cratered, yet surprisingly intact. Milam's precision ensured the destruction was contained, sparing the surrounding environment from total devastation. Once I saw it had been incapacitated, I wasted no time. Seizing the opportunity, I dashed at the Chaos Dragon through the thick smoke enveloping its massive body. The chaotic environment swirled around me, the debris and dust obscuring my vision, but I focused on my target. Now that I was close enough, I activated my sealing ability. It had been a while since I used verglass binding, and I felt a familiar surge of energy coursing through me. This attack is an application of frost magic, and represents an improved version of unlimited imprisonment. While it was certainly potent, verglass binding took it several steps further, allowing me to restrict my opponent's movement and completely nullify their ability to use skills and magic. The overwhelming cold infused into the chains I conjured would ensure that the Chaos Dragon was rendered helpless. As I closed the distance, I felt the weight of my decision. This technique was not just a mere binding. It was a statement. The only downside to this move was that the target must be incapacitated in the first place for it to work. It was a small price to pay for such an effective and efficient ability, especially given how little magicules it consumed compared to the other techniques in my arsenal. Before the dragon could recover from Milam's devastating onslaught, chains made of brilliant white ice manifested out of thin air. The air around me chilled, and I could sense the frost creeping along the ground. Each chain link was intricately designed, resembling shimmering icicles and emanating a cold so intense it seemed to freeze the atmosphere around us. To accommodate the target's immense size, the length and thickness of the chains rapidly increased, twisting and stretching as they wrapped around the Chaos Dragon's body. As the chains tightened, I could hear the dragon's furious growls morph into frustrated roars. The icy bindings gripped its scales, and the cold seeped into its very being, freezing the raging energy that surged within. With each passing second, I felt the power radiating from the dragon diminish, the air around it cooling to an almost frigid state as its struggles became increasingly futile. The moment I established the binding, a powerful aura enveloped the chains, glowing faintly in a hue of blue that indicated my intent. The icy tendrils locked the dragon in place, immobilizing its limbs and forcing it into submission. Its fierce eyes locked onto mine, filled with a mixture of anger and confusion, but I knew that beneath that chaotic exterior lay a soul in torment. With verglass binding, holding the creature in place, I focused on the next step. Standing before the Chaos Dragon, I focused intently on the task at hand. Channeling Azathoth's soul gluttony, I initiated the probing process to locate its core. The trails of the void god unfurled from my essence, wrapping around the dragon's form with a haunting grace. It was a surreal sight. The void was now enveloping the chaotic energy that had once defined this powerful creature, a stark contrast to the ferocity it had displayed just moments ago. I wasn't actually going to devour it, at least not in the traditional sense. I simply needed to search for the dragon's core. As expected, it didn't take long for me to pinpoint the source of its immense power, pulsing faintly within the dragon's being. With precise control, I safely extracted it from the depths of the creature's essence, cradling the core in my hands as I stored it securely within my imaginary space. Now that I had secured the core, I stepped back from the Chaos Dragon, which was now little more than an empty shell, stripped of its life force. The once mighty creature that had posed such a threat now lay still, a haunting reminder of the battle that had just unfolded. Milam landed beside me, her expression a mixture of confusion and concern as she took in the sight of the lifeless dragon. Did it work?" she asked, her gaze fixed anxiously on the dragon's corpse, searching for signs of life that were no longer there. Wanting to ease her mind, I removed the core from my subspace and held it out for her to see. The core shimmered softly in the light, a delicate object that belied its immense power. While it still needs to be purified, it's safe. The dragon in front of us is merely a corpse," I explained, allowing her a moment to absorb the information. A wave of relief washed over her features as she processed my words. "Thank you, Rimuru," she exclaimed, her joy bubbling over as she quickly wrapped her arms around me in a tight hug. The warmth of her gratitude was infectious, but I was momentarily caught off guard by her sudden display of affection. "Ah, okay, you're welcome, please let me go," I pleaded, laughter mingling with my discomfort. Thankfully, she happily complied, releasing me from her grasp with a bright smile. After I recollected myself, we turned to face the empty shell of the Chaos Dragon. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of what had transpired. "What should we do with it, Rimuru?" she asked, her brow furrowing as she regarded the remains. I could see the wheels turning in her mind, considering the implications of the creature's demise. I thought about it for a moment, my eyes scanning the carcass. It was a tragic sight. After briefly analyzing the corpse, I concluded it was no longer a viable host for the dragon. The energy that had once surged through it was extinguished, leaving behind a vessel that had served its purpose. It would be far better to embed this core into a dragon egg, allowing an offspring to become the new host. If you don't mind, I can store it within my subspace," I suggested, my voice steady. "All right, I don't know what to do about it anyway. We also can't just have it lying around here, you know?" Milam replied, her enthusiasm returning as she nodded in agreement. I approached the corpse, steeling myself as I placed my hand on its scales. Turning around to face Milam, she gave me a reassuring nod of approval, and I proceeded with my plan. "Devour it all, Azathoth," I muttered under my breath, my voice almost lost in the aftermath of the battle. My skill immediately responded, a surge of energy pulsing through me as it activated. In less than a second, the gigantic corpse of the Chaos Dragon was absorbed into Azathoth, leaving nothing behind but the mild destruction caused by the battle that had taken place. The ground around us settled, the eerie quiet returning as the chaos of battle faded into memory. Yuki's pav shit. I'm seriously at a loss for words. Right now, Kigali and I were sitting inside a hidden room in the third layer of the Undercity, having just observed everything that happened using a crystal ball. The room remained a secret from the rest of the group, although I was unsure if Rimuru had found it. Either way, it didn't matter. I was still trying to process what the hell we just watched. Yuki-sama, Kigali's smooth and calm voice broke the silence, drawing my attention away from the swirling thoughts in my mind. I turned to face her, forcing myself to focus. Alright, sorry about that, I was spacing out. I apologized, rubbing my temples in a futile attempt to ease the tension building inside me. What should we do, Yuki-sama? She asked, her tone now sounding more concerned. The worry etched on her face mirrored my own anxiety. What we just witnessed undoubtedly left a permanent impact on us. I had planned to draw Rimuru into combat, but not directly. I intended to gauge his power without the risk of engaging him in a full-on fight. I wanted to see just how strong he really was. So, I convinced Mariabelle that he was no threat. It took a while, but after feeding her delusions, she finally had enough confidence to take him on. As for Milam, we had unsealed the Chaos Dragon, serving as the perfect distraction to take her out of the equation. The strategy was sound. At least, that's what I had thought. To say that I got more than I bargained for would be a massive understatement. I knew Rimuru was powerful, but not to this extent. The feats he kept demonstrating made me question if the whole thing had been a nightmare. Unfortunately, it wasn't. The moments we observed played out in my mind like a haunting reel. With little to no effort, Rimuru dispatched Mariabelle's group as if they were nothing more than mere insects. He had shattered the army of golems intended to overwhelm him, reducing them to mere fragments in a single, devastating sweep. I could almost feel the energy crackling in the air as he unleashed that powerful attack, and it was terrifying to witness. The sheer display of power made my stomach twist in knots. This was no longer just about gauging his strength. It was about realizing the vast chasm that lay between us. The calculated plans I had woven began to unravel before my eyes. I had envisioned an opportunity to test the waters, to chip away at the facade of his invincibility. Instead, I had confirmed that he was in an entirely different league. I clenched my fists, anger mixing with a profound sense of dread. The depth of his abilities was staggering. He had not only handled the situation with a casual ease but had also provided support to Milam, neutralizing a threat that could have turned disastrous for everyone. Watching him operate with such confidence and composure was unsettling. It forced me to confront a reality I had tried to deny. I was no match for him. Not now, at least. Yuki-sama, are you alright? Kigali's voice pulled me back from my spiraling thoughts, and I forced a smile to reassure her. I'm fine. I lied, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. Deep down, I knew I had to recalibrate my strategy to leverage any possible advantage against someone like Rimuru. As much as I had plotted and schemed, the events had exposed the futility of my plans. I needed to rethink everything. My desire to outmaneuver Rimuru had turned into an urgent need to survive. The gap between us was not just a hurdle. No, it was a chasm, and I would need to find a way to bridge it or risk being consumed. Minutes passed in silence, and I eventually managed to regain my composure. As Kigali and I headed for the exit, a figure burst through the door. It was Mariabelle. She had definitely seen better days. While she wasn't injured, she looked like a mess. Rage and confusion etched across her features, her hair slightly disheveled as if she had just come from a storm. What the hell was that? Mariabelle's voice was laced with fury, the intensity so palpable it felt like the very walls of the room might crack under the pressure. I maintained a calm demeanor, almost amused, as I slowly approached the furious girl. Her eyes were wild, and I could see the agitation radiating off her in waves. Whoa, relax. I may have underestimated Rimuru a bit, I said with a mocking grin. But hey, look on the bright side. At least you're still alive. My tone dripped with sarcasm, which only seemed to stoke the fire of her rage even further. Don't test me, answer my question, she demanded, her voice rising to a near screech, echoing in the confined space. Geez. I thought I could almost feel my eardrums vibrating. I'm not sure what you want me to tell you. Rimuru was just stronger than I thought. It was a simple mistake. I continued, goading her with my nonchalance. I knew I should have made you join the fight. We would have stood a chance if you were there. Maribel exclaimed, her frustration palpable. I couldn't help but scoff at her naive belief. While I was confident in my strength, I wasn't so foolish as to think I could take Rimuru down in my current state. Nonchalantly, I shrugged, leaning back against the wall as if we were discussing nothing more serious than the weather. I want to live, you know. And the good thing is, you're still alive too. I replied cheerfully, my voice still laced with mockery. Her face flushed a deep crimson, and I could see the veins throbbing on her forehead, threatening to burst like a balloon. The sight was almost comical. Shut up, you are to listen to my every command. She bellowed, each word sharp enough to cut. I tilted my head, feigning ignorance as a sly smile crept across my face. And why would I? I asked, genuinely curious. You're under my control, she screamed back, her voice filled with desperation and fury. At that, I couldn't contain my laughter any longer. The sound erupted from me, a mixture of amusement and disbelief. Her anger was like a fiery storm, yet I stood completely unfazed. The juxtaposition of her seething rage and my carefree demeanor was almost absurd. It wasn't just her anger that amused me. It was the stark contrast between our moods. Just moments ago, I had been brooding over the realization of how much Rimuru had surpassed my expectations, feeling a swell of anxiety mixed with dread. But now, watching Maribel explode in rage at the very situation I had orchestrated felt invigorating. Once my laughter subsided, I finally decided to break the news to her. Seriously? After all this time, you still think I'm under your control? I asked, my voice dripping with mockery. As soon as the words left my mouth, Maribel's anger began to fade, replaced by a flicker of confusion that quickly morphed into anxiety. I stepped forward, and she stumbled back, her earlier bravado evaporating like mist in the sun. The flaring behavior that had defined her moments ago was nowhere to be found. I thought I was gullible. But you're something else entirely. I was acting the whole time. Anyone could have seen it, I explained, my tone sharpening with each word. Horror spread across her face, realization dawning on her. Your power, the unique skill, greed, is certainly useful. However, I paused for effect, allowing the weight of my words to settle in the air between us. In a flash, I closed the distance between us, my movements smooth and deliberate. Before she could fully comprehend what was happening, I leaned close to her ear. Not in your hands, I whispered coldly. Without giving her a chance to react, I sent my fist crashing into her solar plexus. The impact was brutal, her small frame offered almost no resistance, and I could feel the sickening thud as my fist penetrated her upper body. Maribel stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock as she gasped for breath. Her confusion gave way to the stark reality of her situation. The world around her seemed to spin, and I watched as her legs buckled, struggling to maintain balance. The scene was fitting for someone who had dared to believe she could control me. I'll be taking this, thank you very much, I said, my voice still cold but layered with a palpable malice. Less than confirmed. The individual, Yuki Kagarazaka, has successfully acquired the unique skill, greed, greater than the voice of the world echoed in my mind, a chorus of triumph and satisfaction. I felt the power of greed being etched into my soul, its potential unfurling like a dark flower blooming within me. In Maribel's hands, this skill would have been squandered, a mere tool in a fool's grasp. But that wouldn't be the case with me. As all life disappeared from her eyes, I gently placed her lifeless body on the ground, a finality settling over the moment. I took a moment to clean the blood from my fist, my heart racing with the thrill of power surging through me. This was the path I had chosen, and there was no turning back. I turned to face Kigali, who stood there, completely unfazed by the brutality that had just unfolded before her. Her calm demeanor was as cold and calculated as always, as if she had seen this coming all along. Not a single flicker of surprise or concern crossed her features. With a cheerful smile, I clasped my hands together. The sound of the clap echoing through the now eerily silent room broke the tension that had built up in the aftermath of Maribel's death. Well, I said, my voice carrying an unsettling cheerfulness that contrasted sharply with the carnage that had just taken place. I suppose we should rethink our plans. Kigali's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile, her eyes gleaming with an understanding that needed no words. We had just taken another step forward, and I couldn't help but feel a surge of excitement for what came next. Chapter 30 Moments of Clarity. Rimuru's POV 3 days had passed since the disastrous expedition to JackDaWeb, and the aftermath lingered in the air like a thick fog. Well, I say disastrous, but that description might be misleading. In reality, it was more catastrophic for the opposing side, particularly for Yuki and his plans. Whatever intricate scheme he had concocted, assuming he truly had one, had utterly collapsed. Aside from the mild inconvenience caused by the Chaos Dragon attack and the minor environmental damage that followed, my side emerged relatively unscathed. It was a stark reminder of the disparity in our power levels. Speaking of the Chaos Dragon, I managed to remove the lingering effects of greed. Once I had stabilized the core, I placed it inside a pseudo-soul. By fusing it with a master core, I created an avatar, which would serve as a vessel for its body after a period of incubation. The egg was nestled safely within the dungeon, resting and developing in preparation for its eventual hatching. Needless to say, Milam was incredibly thankful for the act. After the Chaos Dragon fiasco concluded, my focus shifted to ensuring the safety of the remaining expedition team and the Dark Elves. We escorted them to safety, guiding them through the remnants of their once proud city. However, with Amrita sustaining significant damage, there was an immediate problem. The number of homes available for them was insufficient. Luckily, I knew that the repairs wouldn't take long. I offered them temporary refuge in the labyrinth while the damage was fixed. The vast space was more than capable of accommodating them. My thoughts suddenly drifted to Yuki, Kigali, and Maribel. Ever since they had broken off from our group, they had been conspicuously absent. It was unusual, to say the least, and I couldn't help but wonder where they had disappeared to. Did they witness the chaos unfold from a safe distance? Or had they run away entirely, like Maribel seemed to have done during the battle? The more I thought about it, the more questions piled up. Were they somehow responsible for the Chaos Dragon's appearance? After all, their departure had coincided with its sudden emergence. But as quickly as those thoughts formed, I dismissed them. It wasn't that I doubted the possibility. I simply couldn't be bothered to expend the mental energy speculating on their motives or whereabouts. Snapping back to reality, I straightened in my seat, ready to begin our gathering. It wasn't exactly a formal meeting. It was more about introducing Testarossa to my executives. I briefly scanned the faces in the hall, noting their attentive expressions. "Thank you all for responding to my sudden call," I said, my voice firm yet gentle. "I had intended to hold this meeting over 2 weeks ago, but the expedition got in the way," I continued. Everyone nodded in acknowledgement, a silent understanding passing between us. "It's no problem at all," Rimuru-sama, Hakuro assured, his calm demeanor a steady presence in the room. "More importantly, how did the expedition go? Was it indeed a trap?" Benimaru asked, his curiosity piqued. "I suppose you could call it that. However, I don't have any solid proof that Yuki set it up." "Still, it's suspicious that he left right before everything went downhill," I explained, which immediately drew my executive's attention, except those who had been with me during the chaos. "What exactly happened?" Shuna questioned, her tone filled with genuine concern. There was too much to unpack, and I didn't want to overwhelm them. "A brief overview would have to suffice for now. To keep things short," I said. "A Chaos Dragon attacked, that little girl from the festival tried to take me down, and Yuki was nowhere to be found throughout the entire ordeal." I delivered the news casually, but the reaction was immediate. "A Chaos Dragon?" Gobta exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Although he had been present during the attack, he, Shion, and Sue had stayed with the expedition team and hadn't witnessed the chaos unfold on the surface. "The tremors you felt were caused by the Chaos Dragon attacking the castle. That's why I had to leave abruptly to assist Milam," I clarified, watching as their surprise shifted to understanding. I see. That must have been a tough fight," Gobta murmured, the awe evident in his tone. "Not exactly," I replied, shaking my head dismissively. "But I won't go into details. What's important is that it's been dealt with." A familiar look of admiration spread across their faces, a testament to their unwavering faith in my abilities. "As expected of Rimuru-sama," Shion declared proudly from behind me, her voice beaming with enthusiasm. "Kufufu, such a creature is no match for Rimuru-sama." Diablo chimed in, his eerie laughter filling the space, contrasting sharply with Xian's exuberance. Sigh. I could feel my resolve to keep the atmosphere light wane as I contemplated the antics of those two. For now, I decided to ignore them and move on. Now, let's focus on why I called for this meeting, I said, gesturing toward the woman standing beside me. At my cue, Testarossa stepped forward slightly, radiating an air of nobility and confidence that immediately captured everyone's attention. "It is a pleasure to meet you all," she began, her voice smooth and commanding. "My name is Testarossa, and Rimuru-sama has appointed me as Tempest's ambassador. Rest assured that I will fulfill my duty and ensure that our nation is portrayed in a positive light. But most importantly, I will make sure that none dare to look down on us." Her tone was respectful yet imbued with a powerful elegance that demanded respect. I smiled at her introduction, nodding in approval while I gauged my subordinates' reactions. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to appreciation, and after exchanging brief glances and nods, they turned back to Testarossa, offering her approving smiles. Satisfied with her introduction, Testarossa stepped back to her original position beside me, her demeanor relaxed but ready. "It was only a matter of time before Tempest acquired an ambassador," I continued, breaking the slight tension in the air. After all, I couldn't simply stroll around as a demon lord. The room was filled with light laughter and nods of agreement, a shared understanding among us. "We look forward to working with you, Testarossa-san," Shuna said cheerfully, her warm tone adding to the welcoming atmosphere. The gentle glimmer in her eyes reflected her optimism. "Likewise, Shuna-san," Testarossa replied, returning the smile with one of her own, a genuine warmth softening her otherwise regal demeanor. The moment felt promising, and I could sense the eagerness in my subordinates as they embraced the change. There was a new energy in the room, a collective anticipation for what lay ahead. "Now then," I said, shifting my tone to a more serious note. The energy in the room shifted instantly, each of my subordinates attuning to my change in demeanor. "Have you received the invitation?" I asked, my gaze settling on Myeolmile, who nodded in response, his expression serious. "The council was a mess after the festival," he began, a hint of frustration creeping into his tone. "However, they finally decided to let Tempest join the Western Council." He continued as he pulled out a scroll and handed it to me with an air of finality. Unrolling the document, I quickly scanned its contents. It was indeed an invitation for a formal meeting with representatives from other nations in the council. "The meeting will take place 5 days from now, and I will be allowed to bring 3 people with me." "This looks promising," I muttered to myself, feeling a spark of optimism before turning back to my gathered subordinates. "The meeting will take place 5 days from now," I announced, ensuring everyone's attention was on me. "I will bring 3 of you with me while the rest will carry on with their duties," I said. "Who will you bring, Rimuru-sama?" Xian asked, her excitement bubbling over. Unfortunately for her, I had already made up my mind. Xian wasn't one of the 3 I could trust for diplomatic matters, and I could feel the impending disappointment in the air. "Shuna, Sue, and Testarossa will be going with me," I answered, maintaining a calm demeanor as I made the announcement. Shuna and Testarossa bowed with bright smiles, radiating enthusiasm, while Sue simply nodded, his stoic expression unchanged. I could practically feel Xian's disbelief even without looking back at her. "Rimuru-sama?" Xian exclaimed, her voice laced with dejection. "There won't be a fight. These are diplomatic matters. A lot is at stake here, so I can't risk you being there," I told her firmly, hoping to convey my decision without sounding too harsh. It was a delicate balance, and I didn't want to hurt her feelings. Thankfully, she didn't throw a tantrum. Instead, I heard a loud sigh escape her lips. It seemed she had learned to control her emotions better, even if it didn't lessen her disappointment. Benimaru then raised his hand, and I gestured for him to speak. "I thought you wouldn't be showing up to the council. Isn't that why you recruited Testarossa?" he asked, genuine curiosity evident in his tone. "Oh, that's for subsequent meetings and other diplomatic agreements," I explained, a hint of reassurance in my voice. "However, since this will be Tempest's debut into the council, I must be there for the first encounter." There was a brief silence as a few of my subordinates processed my words, but soon, Myeolmile raised his hand again, his expression serious. "Assuming they reject your request to join the council, what will you do then, Rimuru-sama?" he asked, genuine concern threading through his tone. I didn't need to ponder that. In fact, I had already prepared for that exact outcome. Simple. I'll press onward, I replied nonchalantly, my demeanor calm. A few eyebrows raised in confusion at my casual response. Resting my arm on the side of my chair, I leaned my chin into my hand, adopting a relaxed posture. Joining the council will simply make my goal slightly easier to accomplish. However, it is by no means necessary. If they don't want us, then so be it. I'm already part of the Demon Lord Council, which holds more significance. I elaborated, my tone unyielding in its indifference. As my words sunk in, I noticed the surprise in my subordinates' expressions. Their eyes widened as realization dawned on them, followed by a palpable wave of confidence washing over the room. The initial tension dissipated, replaced by an understanding that the stakes weren't as high as I had previously suggested. My earlier insistence on caution had merely been to keep Xian at bay. Myeomile chuckled, a blend of disbelief and newfound confidence gracing his features. Never would I have thought that becoming part of the Western Council was a minor task. But hearing it come from you feels so natural, he joked, eliciting laughter from a few others and myself. I couldn't help but chuckle along. In the grand scheme of things, Tempest's admission into the Council was merely a stepping stone, not the endgame. The world was vast, and while the Council held its power, I knew Tempest's strength and influence were not dependent on their acceptance. I was already on a path that far exceeded their significance. Regardless of the Council's decision, my ambitions were far from thwarted. If they wanted to keep their doors closed, then I'd leave them be. While we were all gathered, I figured now was as good a time as any to relay one of my contingencies should Tempest be rejected. Benimaru, Hakuro, Xian, I called out to the three, who immediately snapped to attention, their focus unwavering. I want our military forces to be bolstered. In the event that the Council rejects us, we must prepare. Tempest sits between the East and West, and that position could quickly become a vulnerability if we're surrounded by potentially hostile or, at best, neutral powers. My voice carried the weight of the decision, though the tension it might have caused was quickly countered by the eager grins forming on their faces. Understood. They responded in unison, their excitement barely restrained. It was no secret that Tempest's military was already one of the strongest in the world. With the strength of 2 true dragons and plenty of formidable races under my banner, our nation held a significant edge over many. Still, you could never be too careful, and enhancing our military strength further was only logical. Especially given our precarious position on the world stage. If the Council rejected us, we'd be surrounded by nations that weren't exactly friendly. And while they might not be outright hostile, neutrality could easily shift depending on the political climate. I glanced at the map in my mind. Tempest's position was a double-edged sword. We were smack dab in the middle, a crucial gateway between Eastern and Western countries. But if things went south with the Council, that same positioning would mean being flanked on both sides. If we didn't prepare, we'd be exposed. Gabiru, Vesta, I called out to the next pair, watching as they straightened, eyes locked on me. Put the Magitrain research on hold for now. It's more prudent to channel our resources into developing technology that could prove useful during wartime. I gave you those blueprints of weaponry from my previous world, but I told you to postpone their development. I think it's time we revisit those, I instructed, watching their eyes light up at the prospect. Tempest had grown in leaps and bounds thanks to its innovations, particularly in terms of improving quality of life. Our research and development department was second to none, capable of turning concepts from my previous world into reality. But those same capabilities could be repurposed to serve us in more direct ways. With the right focus and resources, we could develop weaponry and technology to secure our position, even in the face of potential conflict. It shall be done, Rimuru-sama, Vesta replied with a calm smile, offering a light bow. Beside him, Gabiru gave a spirited nod, already brimming with ideas. The atmosphere in the room was one of quiet excitement. Though none of us wanted war, it was clear that my subordinates thrived on the idea of improving Tempest's defenses, ensuring that no one would dare challenge our strength. While the idea of being rejected by the Council wasn't ideal, it wasn't a cause for worry. I had no intention of giving up on my goals. We'd stand tall, surrounded or not. Lastly, I turned to face Diablo. Out of everything I had to discuss today, this was the part one dreaded the most. Not because it was a bad idea. No, it was because of the sheer unpredictability that came with giving Diablo an open-ended task. Diablo, I called his name, my tone laced with a heavy weight, already bracing myself for what was to come. He immediately stepped forward with an obedient and exaggerated bow, his grin widening as if he already knew what I was about to say. His enthusiasm made my stomach sink a little. "Yes, Rimuru-sama?" His voice carried that ever-present sinister undertone, and I could see the glint in his eyes as if he was waiting for this. With a resigned sigh, I gave the instruction, knowing full well the implications of my words. "Your task is to grow our military's numbers," I said, keeping it as brief as possible. The less I said, the less he could potentially run wild with it. At least, that's what I hoped. Even with my concise phrasing, Diablo's grin only grew wider. He threw his head back and let out a low, sinister laugh that sent shivers through the room. Everyone stayed silent, not because they lacked opinions, but because it was no secret that Diablo was by far my strongest subordinate. It was rare to see anyone question him, even if they felt uneasy. Meanwhile, Testarossa merely shot him a look of mild amusement as if seeing him like this just confirmed what she already thought. She's always considered Diablo a bit of a weirdo, and this moment only amplified that thought. "Rest assured, Rimuru-sama. Tempest's safety will be secured," he declared with a tone that dripped with confidence and menace. Sigh. I may have just made a huge mistake. It was almost terrifying how certain he sounded. While I trusted Diablo to handle things efficiently, his interpretation of my orders could easily take an extreme turn. Knowing him, it wasn't outside the realm of possibility that he'd summon an army of demons, bringing thousands or even tens of thousands under Tempest's banner. It's not that he would act against my wishes. It's quite the opposite. Diablo was nothing if not loyal, and that loyalty meant he would follow my orders to the letter, down to the most terrifying, literal interpretation, which is exactly why I was second-guessing myself. I could already picture the fallout of what I had just unleashed. I cast a quick glance at the rest of the room. They, too, had picked up on the weight of the task I'd given him, though none dared to voice it. This was Diablo, after all. He was known for his extreme methods. Even with their trust in me, unease settled in the air. But despite my growing anxiety, I knew it was the right call. Tempest's security had to come first. Strength in numbers was necessary if we faced the possibility of isolation or conflict from the West. So, as much as I dreaded what Diablo might do, I knew that bolstering our forces was a necessary move. Even if it came with complications. "Just, don't go overboard," I added, more to myself than to Diablo, though I had little hope that would restrain him. "Whatever happens, I'll deal with it when the time comes." Velzard's pav I wandered through the city square, my steps aimless, though my mind was anything but. The evening was approaching, and I was eager to sit down for dinner with Rimuru. His meeting should be over by now, though he probably still had a few papers to sift through. Sigh. I missed him, even though I was by his side for 2 whole weeks. I paused momentarily, my thoughts drifting to the time I spent as his sword. Well, I didn't exactly become a sword, but my essence had been fully assimilated into his weapon during our stay in Jistav. The experience was strange, to say the least. But what amazed me most wasn't just that Rimuru had such a skill. His blade, somehow, could withstand the essence of a true dragon. The raw power coursing through me channeled into his weapon should have been overwhelming, yet it didn't even crack. It was a testament to Rimuru's constant outpour of magicules and Kurobi's masterful craftsmanship. Eventually, I found myself at Tempest's central fountain. The soft trickle of water harmonized with the low hum of the bustling city, creating a soothing backdrop. I leaned my back against the fountain's cool stone and looked up. The sky was a breathtaking canvas of deep blues fading into rich oranges, streaked with hints of lavender as dusk settled in. The sun, slowly sinking behind the horizon, painted the clouds in soft hues of pink and gold, casting a gentle warmth that seemed to bathe the entire city in a serene glow. It was one of those moments where time seemed to slow down. The faint breeze carried with it the sounds of the bustling city coming to life at night. It was peaceful, almost like the city exhaled after a long day. I closed my eyes briefly, letting the tranquility sink in. This calm was a stark contrast to my immense power. For Rimuru to take that power and turn it into something so focused, so refined, it was remarkable. No being had ever imagined the possibility of forging a true dragon's essence into the core of a weapon. The sheer magnitude of our strength made that concept seem laughable. And yet, here I was, still feeling the aftereffects of being comfortably bound to the blade. It was strange. Rimuru had managed to do the impossible. Even now, I was still trying to wrap my head around it. The more I thought about it, the more I marveled at him. Despite being with him for a decent amount of time now, there was always something new to admire, some deeper layer of his strength or ingenuity. As I stood there in the heart of Tempest, watching the sky shift into twilight, I couldn't help but let my mind drift back to JackDaWeb. Being in sword form had been surprisingly comfortable. Even when sheathed, I could still observe the world, but it was like being submerged in a warm, soothing hot spring. It was so relaxing that I'd barely spoken the entire time. Besides, I wanted to give Milam and Rimuru space to bond. Before my thoughts could wander too far, I felt a warm hand on my shoulder. Looking down from the dusky sky, I saw the person I'd been waiting for. "Good evening, Velz-chan," Rimuru greeted, his voice full of cheer despite just coming from a long meeting. "Fu tilde good evening, Rimu-kun," I responded, his presence instantly lifting my spirits as I stood up straighter, my smile widening. "Sorry to keep you waiting," he apologized, but I gently shook my head. "No need. I'm just glad you're here." My tone was soft, and his smile in response felt like a quiet affirmation. "Let's get out of here, shall we?" He extended his hand to me, which I gladly took, warmth spreading through me at the simple contact. Though a few weeks is hardly anything from my perspective, the wait for another peaceful dinner with Rimuru had felt oddly agonizing. Now that he was beside me, the world seemed a little brighter, the sounds of the city fading into the background. As we walked toward our favorite restaurant, our fingers intertwined naturally, hands swinging back and forth in sync. A big smile spread across my face, and I could see Rimuru wearing a similar expression. There was little need for conversation between us. His mere presence was more than enough for me. We soon reached the restaurant, and Rimuru opened the door for us. A Goblina waitress greeted us with a warm smile and a bow. "Welcome back, Rimuru-sama, Velzard-sama," she greeted us, her voice energetic yet respectful. We both nodded in response. "Right this way." She gestured for us to follow, and we gladly did so. The two of us took our usual seats on the second floor, a cozy spot exposed to the open air. It offered the best view of the city streets, now glowing as dusk deepened into night. Lights illuminated the roads, and Tempest's vibrant energy shifted into its lively nightlife. The warm hues from the street lamps painted a charming picture below. "We'll have the usual." "Thank you," Rimuru told the Goblina, who bowed before heading off to prepare our order. The gentle hum of conversation from other diners combined with the distant sounds of the city created a strangely serene environment. It struck me how, despite being the leader of an entire nation, Rimuru chose to dine among his people and blend in like any other citizen. That was just one of the many things that drew me to him. Rimuru was different from the rulers I knew about or expected from leaders with such immense power. When people imagine royalty, they envision grand feasts behind closed doors, surrounded by other nobles and leaders, always separated from the common folk. But he defied that image. To him, the people of Tempest weren't just subjects under his rule. They were family. He wasn't elevated above them in his own mind. Instead, he walked alongside them, ate with them, and laughed with them. This quiet, unspoken humility made Rimuru different from anyone else who held such authority. Tempest was more than just his kingdom. It was his home, filled with people he cherished and protected like his own. Returning to reality, I noticed Rimuru wearing an amused grin, and I realized I'd probably been lost in thought for a bit too long. "What's on your mind, Rimu-kun?" I asked, playfully breaking the silence. "There's a spot I'd like to visit after dinner. Judging by the weather today, the sky will be incredibly clear later." "It'll be the perfect time to go there," he said, his tone brimming with excitement. Tilda? Where is this place you're talking about?" I asked, curiosity piqued. His grin widened, now sparkling with excitement. "It's on a cliffside overlooking the entire city. Without a doubt, it's the best place to view Tempest from, especially at night," he explained, his eyes lighting up as he spoke. "That sounds lovely," I replied, already imagining the serene view he described. "Would you like to go with me later?" he asked, the excitement in his voice unwavering. It did sound like a beautiful spot to relax, but something about his enthusiasm gave me the sense he had something planned. Not that I minded. Of course, I answered smoothly, my lips curving into a teasing smile. "We'd been separated for 2 weeks, you know. I'd like to spend some time with you again," I continued. The instant I finished speaking, his face flushed slightly red, and he began awkwardly scratching the back of his head. "Ehehehe. We were technically together during those 2 weeks," he said sheepishly, trying yet failing to downplay his embarrassment. "Foo tilde, you know what I meant," I replied, keeping my teasing tone steady. Seeing him flustered was always fun, especially when he tried to play it cool. We continued engaging in small banter, the light-hearted back and forth effortlessly passing the time until our food finally arrived. The familiar and inviting aroma of freshly prepared ramen filled the air. The goblina waitress carefully placed 2 bowls of ramen in front of us. Each bowl was a masterpiece in itself. Delicate noodles swimming in a rich, golden broth that shimmered under the soft glow of the restaurant's lights. The toppings were neatly arranged on top, making the dish look almost too good to eat. Thinly sliced chashu pork, perfectly marinated and grilled, sat elegantly on the side. A soft boiled egg, split in half with a velvety yolk, rested next to it, while finely chopped green onions, bamboo shoots, and a sprinkle of nori added vibrant colors to the dish. The broth alone was something to marvel at. Its scent was a beautiful mix of savory miso and earthy umami, perfectly balanced with just a hint of sweetness. The steam from the bowl added to the sensory experience, filling the air with the tantalizing promise of a satisfying meal. Rimuru grinned at me, picking up his chopsticks and gesturing toward the food. "Itadakimasu," he said cheerfully before diving in, easily pulling a strand of noodles from the bowl. I followed suit, the warmth of the ramen bowl seeping into my hands as I brought the chopsticks to my lips. The first bite was heavenly. The noodles were soft yet springy, absorbing the rich broth that clung to each strand. "This is as amazing as always," I commented, savoring the flavors of the dish. Rimuru nodded in agreement, his face lighting up as he took another bite. "Definitely. It's no wonder this place is our favorite. They never miss." The comforting warmth of the ramen, combined with the peaceful atmosphere, made everything feel perfect. The bustling noise from the streets below faded into the background as we enjoyed our meal together. We took our time with our meal, savoring each bite. By the time we finished, almost an hour had passed. I glanced outside and noticed that the warm rays of sunset had given way to the full moon, shining brilliantly in the night sky. As Rimuru had predicted, the atmosphere was perfectly clear, allowing thousands of stars to dot the black canvas above like shimmering jewels. After one last bow, we stood up and made our way to the exit. As we stepped outside, the cold evening breeze greeted me, wrapping around my skin like a comforting blanket. I had always liked the cold. It was a part of my essence, after all. I turned to face Rimuru, who was already looking in my direction, a warm and excited smile plastered on his face. "Would you like to walk there? Or fly?" he asked, his eyes beaming with anticipation. "Let's fly there. I'm eager to see this location you told me about," I replied, and he nodded happily. He extended his hand to me, and I gladly took it. With a brief pause, we both took flight, our movements graceful and fluid. In mere seconds, we soared a few hundred meters off the ground, the city of Tempest sprawling below us like a vibrant tapestry woven with lights and life. The wind whipped around us, stronger and colder from our altitude, but I relished it, feeling invigorated by the chill. The night sky enveloped us, a deep indigo expanse sprinkled with stars that twinkled like distant suns. Rimuru turned to face the direction he wanted to go and pointed confidently. I nodded, and we launched forward, gliding through the air. The sensation of flight was exhilarating, the cool breeze rushing past us as we traversed great distances in mere moments. As we flew, I took in the breathtaking view of the bustling city below, its streets illuminated with lively lanterns, the sounds of laughter and chatter faintly reaching us from afar. The shimmering lights danced like fireflies, creating a beautiful contrast against the dark backdrop of the night. Throughout the entire flight, our hands remained intertwined. At that moment, no words were necessary. The serenity of the night, the exhilaration of flying, and the beauty of the world around us spoke volumes about how we felt. As quickly as we left, our journey had ended as we gracefully landed on top of the hill. The location wasn't far from the city, but Rimuru was right. The view from here was unlike what I'd imagined. Tempest was far enough that the city could be seen as a whole but not so far as to look tiny. I was astonished by the scenery. While I took in the view, Rimuru sat at the edge of the cliff, his legs swaying back and forth in a carefree manner. He placed his hands behind him and leaned back, relaxing his body. A calm and serene smile formed on his face, exuding a tranquility akin to the gentle lapping of ocean waves on a quiet night. I was entranced by this peaceful aura radiating from him. "Ha ha ha! Why don't you sit down, Vels-chan?" he asked, his cheerful voice breaking the silence. "All right," I responded sheepishly, slightly embarrassed that I was lost in thought again. He chuckled for a moment while I recollected myself. I sat beside him, letting my legs dangle from the cliff top. Once I found a comfortable position, I rested my hand on top of his. He didn't say a word, and his gaze remained fixed on the scenery before him. The calmness and serenity in his expression were surreal, drawing me in deeper like the endless depths of the ocean. Following his gaze, I turned away to face what lay before us. I had been so focused on Rimuru that I hadn't paid much attention to the scenery. Now that I finally laid eyes on it properly, I was stunned. The sky stretched out endlessly above, a canvas of deep indigo punctuated by thousands of shimmering stars. The full moon hung brightly in the heavens, massive and luminous, casting a silvery glow across the landscape. Beneath its light, the city of Tempest twinkled like a treasure chest, the vibrant lights of its nightlife twinkling and flickering in the distance, creating a lively contrast to the peaceful night. Surrounding the city, the great Jura forest sprawled majestically, its dense greenery contrasting sharply with the soft glow of the moonlight. Beyond the forest, the mountains loomed, their silhouettes dark and imposing against the starry sky. The serenity of nature enveloped us, a picturesque backdrop to this perfect moment. As I gazed at the magnificent scenery, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. The beauty of the night and the sight of Rimuru's calm demeanor filled my heart with warmth and admiration. It was as if I was seeing everything for the first time. At that moment, my mind drifted to my elder brother, Veldora. As the embodiment of creation itself, he had shaped the world with care and artistry. Looking at the vast expanse before me, I couldn't help but feel a surge of appreciation for his work. The sprawling forest, the majestic mountains, and even the shimmering city of Tempest were all reflections of his divine touch. I had always looked up to him, admiring his strength and wisdom, but tonight, I felt a bittersweet pang of longing. I understood that this vibrant and lively world was the result of his vision and dedication. In this serene moment, I realized how much I yearned for his approval and to show him that I, too, could protect and nurture his beautiful creation in my own way. The wind howled softly, mingling with the sounds of crickets and the rustling of leaves. It was a bittersweet reminder that Veldora was gone, likely never to return. Yet, I maintained my smile as I absorbed the view of his masterpiece. Deep down, I knew he would want me to live my best life, to cherish the beauty around me rather than isolate myself as I had done for millennia. Drawing back from the realm of my thoughts, I turned to face Rimuru, who was already looking in my direction. His warm smile remained a beacon of light in the night. "The moon is beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, his voice quiet and gentle. His eyes glowed a bright yellow, penetrating my very soul as if urging me to respond from the depths of my being. In that instant, my heart skipped a beat. The words he spoke echoed a line I had often read in romance manga, and with the thudding of my heart came a rush of heat to my cheeks. My pulse quickened as an overwhelming rush of emotions stirred within me. I shifted my position slightly, tension coiling around me like a tightly wound spring. While Rimuru wore his usual calm smile, the glow of his eyes seemed to see through the layers I had carefully built around myself, waiting for my reply. It is indeed," I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. He chuckled softly, a sound that both soothed and unsettled me. Thoughts raced through my mind. What did he mean by that? Was this simply a casual remark, or was there something deeper hidden beneath his words? My composure slipped further as I struggled to gather my thoughts, but before I could regain my bearings, Rimuru shifted closer. His body turned fully to face mine, and he gently placed both his hands over mine. The warmth of his touch sent shivers down my spine, intensifying the whirlwind of emotions within me. I could feel the tension thickening in the air as if the very fabric of the night held its breath in anticipation. At that moment, everything felt suspended, the world around us fading away until it was just the two of us poised on the edge of something monumental. "I think this charade has gone on for long enough," he continued, his tone still gentle but laden with a new weight that made my heart race. What?" I stuttered, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. What did he mean by charade? Was he referring to how we acted like a couple but weren't really? Did he want it to end? Or was he suggesting that we could become something more? The thought of the first possibility terrified me to the point that I felt the sting of tears threatening to surface. As these questions spiraled through my mind, I felt his grip on my hand tightening ever so slightly, grounding me amidst my turmoil. I really should have told you this long ago. He paused, the silence between us stretching painfully. It was as if time itself had halted, amplifying the tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. I love you, he finally confessed. In that instant, my heart raced faster than it ever had. I got the answer I had dared to hope for, yet the tension in my chest only intensified. My face flushed deeper, and a tremor of disbelief coursed through me. Slowly, he took both my hands, gently cupping them as they lay between us. I'm unsure if you feel the same way about me, but regardless, it's time I finally admitted it to you. We've been playing a couple for so long that it almost felt suffocating. If you don't feel the same way, then that's all right. I'm glad we got to. He tried to speak. I couldn't let him finish. No, I wouldn't allow it. In one swift motion, I broke free from his grasp and cupped the sides of his face, my heart pounding in my ears. Before he could fully comprehend what was happening, I leaned forward, and our lips met for the first time. The kiss was a revelation. It was passionate and intimate, a mingling of hearts transcending time and space. Rimuru was taken by surprise, but he quickly adjusted, his lips responding with a warmth that ignited a fire within me. For those precious seconds, everything else faded into oblivion. It was just us, lost in a moment that felt like it could last an eternity. As we slowly pulled away, the world rushed back, and we found ourselves gazing into each other's eyes. Both of us flushed crimson, a shared realization hanging in the air. The silence now held a different weight. Slowly, the tension dissipated, replaced by a soft, giddy lightness. Rimuru, still beet red, wore a cheeky grin, a stark contrast to the moment's earlier intensity. I take it you feel the same way? He asked, his voice teasing yet hopeful, making us both chuckle. The answer was so obvious that he didn't need to ask. Why, you idiot slime, of course I do, I responded, still feeling a delightful warmth spread across my cheeks as I recalled the sensation of our kiss. His smile widened, and I could see the genuine happiness reflected in his eyes. I'm glad to hear it,